Here at the Reagan Foundation Institute, we've recently launched the Center on Civility and Democracy, and its mission is simple: to promote constructive solutions to the deep divisions that are putting our democracy at risk. Education is among the key solutions. Education remains an issue that can still draw people together to work across political lines. But that's not to say that education is immune from the toxic impacts of incivility. From school board chambers to college squads, we've witnessed just how quickly passionate views can spark hostile confrontations. So with our children's futures at stake, we have to insist on promoting civility in education and count on our leaders to do so. One leader who's been active in this civility effort is Governor Sununu of New Hampshire. Now, civil does not mean quiet, nor is civil code for squishy. I've never heard either of those terms applied to you, Governor. But like Ronald Reagan, Governor Sununu is no shrinking violet. He'll make sure you know where he stands on the issues, but he knows his political opponent is not his enemy, and that thoughtful leadership can find common ground. He's a governor who's been elected to 4 terms and who has won more votes in a single election than any candidate in his state. His record on education would make any governor envious. As he outlined in his most recent State of the State address, New Hampshire's public schools are ranked number 2 in the nation. New Hampshire spends more dollars per child on public education than ever before, and that's after Governor Sununu delivering tax relief and balanced budgets. We know New Hampshire as the live free or die state. Now that doesn't exactly sound like there's a lot of room for compromise, or sound that civil. But Governor Sununu is showing us that to truly live free is to live in a thriving democracy where one can and must lead with civility. Please join me in welcoming Governor Sununu. Thank you, Governor. Oh, absolutely. Great. Welcome, Governor. Terrific to have you here.
Great. I'm very excited and slightly nervous. So, are we streaming this, by the way?
Yeah.
I was told we were streaming this by my father. And that's why I'm nervous, because I know he's watching at home. So.
Well, let's start off with a question your dad's really going to like.
Okay.
As we talked briefly, we've launched the Center on Civility and Democracy, and one of the top issues that we're seeing across the country are people feel that the divisions are damaging our democracy, and it's an overwhelming number that says that we have to do something about it, and education is certainly a key part of the solution. Could you talk a little bit about what governors can do and some of the things you've done in that area?
Sure. So, I mean, I think really since the pandemic, right? Because I've been governor for going on 8 years now. It's 4 terms because I have to get elected every 2 years. And there's kind of 3 lives. There's our pre-pandemic lives, our pandemic lives, and our post-pandemic. But really since the pandemic, what you've seen is one of the most important things is trust, which really there's not a whole lot in this town, right? There's not a whole lot of public trust when it comes to the federal government, Congress, Senate, and all that. But with governors, regardless of party, when you poll folks, they trust their governors, they trust their local leaders, they trust their mayors. So those that have maintained a strong connection to the constituent have been able to be transparent about what they're doing, and transparency is really the foundation of that public trust. And so when you do that, that's how you can start having real conversations. You don't get stagnated into the way of doing things yesterday, and specifically around education, it's okay. Are we going to just do school choice? What does that really mean? And what does it mean for New Hampshire? What does it mean for the city of Manchester? It might be very different than what it means for the town of Salem, New Hampshire, right? And fundamentally in New Hampshire, one of the biggest differences we have over the other 49 states is we are so locally controlled. And it was really how the founding fathers just wanted to design the system, that at the local level should be the areas of influence that have the most policy impact on you and your family and your business. Over time, a lot of states have gotten away from that, right? They've centralized more power in their capitals. We haven't. We've just done just the opposite, and it's that live free or die thing, right? It's about freedom. It's about individual responsibility, individual liberties, allowing the free market of both business and the free market of government, right? And by that, I mean, a lot of times a locality might be doing something in education or otherwise that I completely disagree with. And the Republicans might come to me and say, hey, Gov, we're going to pass a law and say, no town can do X, Y, and Z in education. No, we're not doing that, right? Because at its core, we have to stay true to allowing individuals to make their own choices for better or worse. And so that gets to the democracy issue, right? I'm very optimistic on democracy. I'm very optimistic on where this country is going, actually. And we're going to have bumps in the road. I'm an engineer by trade. And so we're going to have bumps in the road. But the system was designed, those founding fathers were wicked smart, as we say in New Hampshire, right? They really were. The system was designed very, very well. And the most fundamental, important aspect of democracy is your ability to vote and change your path. And you have a say. And as long as we all have a say, now how we consume information and misinformation and all that, that's related, but not really the end-all, be-all. That's a problem, not necessarily something government is going to fix. I think it's a cultural problem. But as long as we all have the power to vote, and we are all voting, and we are all making that choice, it's all in our hands. And I keep pushing to, again, decentralize power. I think that's a really important aspect of getting people to feel like their vote matters, to feel like they can have a real influence on their families' lives, specifically around education.
Well, you mentioned information, access to information, and in the current environment in America, what we teach in our schools and how we teach it is receiving a great deal of scrutiny. And you've championed the civics textbook, and other measures to bolster civics education. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so look, I'm a huge believer. Civics is so crucial. And again, I'm going to brag on New Hampshire a little bit. I have 400 legislators, 400. Like, there's British Parliament, there's U.S. Congress, and then there's the state of New Hampshire. And the 400 in New Hampshire represent only 1.4 million people. So by definition, by math, it's the most representative body of government on the planet, right? So from a civic standpoint, we eat, live, and breathe it. And then you add this aspect of local control. I don't do teacher contracts. I don't decide every pothole that's going to be filled. That's done at the local level. I have no sales and income tax. As a citizen, businesses have some taxes in New Hampshire, but as a citizen, the only tax you might pay is if you own a home. You'll pay property tax. I can't do anything with that. I can't tell you how to spend your property tax at all. You go to town meeting every year. I know it sounds corny to folks, but man, it works. And you battle it out with your neighbor about what is going to happen in your schools and what potholes will be filled and whether you do an upgrade to the wastewater treatment plant. It's all local, and you have complete say on your dollars. So that's why folks are so, if I may, we have a really smart electorate in New Hampshire because we get really involved in issues. And I'm going to take it a step further. This is why we have the first in the nation primary, right? It isn't because it's a nice tradition for us. We are really engaged. Our average citizens are really engaged on the issues, and we have the highest voter turnout because of local control empowers folks to really get involved in what's happening at that level. So I totally forgot what your question was. I apologize.
It's your civics
but
book.
this is why the civics piece is so important, right? Because I think the more our students especially know and appreciate and understand fundamentally how it works, it isn't the government's all corrupt, and if you don't agree with me, you must be, a bad politician and a bad person. I disagree with a lot of politicians, to be sure. 98%, let's go with 98. 98% of elected officials are in it for the right reason. They just want a better result for their community. And so one thing I really try to do on the civic side of things is we talk about empathy, but do we practice it, right? We all have to really strive hard to practice empathy and be a model for our kids. Okay, this person is coming at an issue from a completely different standpoint. I might think their approach and their solution is completely crazy, but they're not crazy. Right, why do they think that way? What's their background? What's their story, right? So maybe I'm missing something here. And just saying, sometimes when someone really disagrees with me, I'll just say, tell me more. I'm not there yet. Tell me more. What else? What am I missing here? And allowing that conversation, that's civics. Making sure the conversations are happening. And hopefully they're happening in the classroom in a constructive way. I think I'm going a little far afield, but as an example that we're seeing every day, the Gaza Israel conflict. The reason I get so frustrated with that, I'm incredibly pro-Israel. And the reason I get so frustrated is because I don't think the conversation is happening in a constructive way in a lot of our classrooms across the country on that issue in particular. And so civics can bring, again, I'm not telling you how you have to agree with me or not agree with me, but how that discussion happens, I think is all based in a good understanding of civics and an appreciation of how your voices can really have an impact, again, going back to the local level, right in your community.
Just to follow up a little more on that, in fact, the next panel is going to be talking about campuses, university campuses, and things are certainly quite volatile there today. Some people feel that students are not arriving in college with the skills to be able to have a dialogue short of confrontation. What are you doing, or what can be done?
Yeah, well, they're definitely not. They are definitely not. And again, that's not going to change fundamentally, unfortunately. There are things that we can do. Again, let's take a step back. They're not because of how they consume information, right? So there's so much of their time is eaten up, whether it's on social media or doom scrolling, or how they're getting their news and their data and what their sources are. They don't even question what the sources are. And that's just the age of technology and how they're absorbing screens and using screen time. So again, going back to that issue of civics, making sure that we're teaching them, not just, you should learn everything you need to know about civics from this book, but understanding the pros and cons of where you get information and how you consume it has a really negative chain reaction. Now, what can we do? I don't want to just harp on screens and social media. It's here to stay, but we really try to emphasize getting off screens and having conversations. And it's really those soft skills, right? It's not just a skill in the classroom in terms of discussion. You guys all have employees, right? It's a soft skill in business. It's team building. It's learning to compromise, understanding you're not there to get everything you want. Sometimes we have a voice, sometimes we think we're right, and someone completely disagrees, and the team goes in a different direction. That's okay, right? You don't have a tantrum and storm out of the room. But that type of problem solving and learning to cope with, I'll call it learning to cope with, loss of ideas. Just because your idea didn't get pushed forward this time doesn't mean we won't come back to it another time. It's amazing how some young people, and I'm a dad. I mean, I have a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, and an 11-year-old. I am living it as a dad. I really am, in all different aspects. But at the core of all of it, quality education, not education that says just do what Governor Sununu says, but quality education with inspirational teachers, that at its fundamental basis is the key, the first domino that has to fall to have quality discussions and give them, I think, these real life workforce skills.
Just on information and how people get it. Obviously, in order for democracy to function, we have to have agreement on common facts and some truth. Otherwise, how do we debate the issues? And how concerned are you about the onslaught of disinformation, misinformation we're getting now, and this looming on the horizon AI-powered disinformation at scale, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, it's incredibly concerning. The hope is this, that I always make the joke, my generation invented social media, and man, did we screw it up. We didn't have the maturity to handle this incredible technology that we created, where we can instantly talk to the whole world, in literally an instant. The hope is, and I do believe in this next generation, that they're growing up in it, they understand it, I think they appreciate the boundaries of it even better than maybe we do. So I don't want to just be blindly optimistic, but I am quite hopeful that they are learning certain skills and nuances about the pros and cons of how to handle a lot of that information. But whether it's AI and deep fakes and all that sort of thing, it's really here to stay. Now, I am by human nature, I go back to that term free market, right? I think we learn, sometimes you have to maybe pull a lot of information down on social media or off the internet and realize it's not true and get burned by it a little bit before you go, wait a minute, I hope I can't keep making this mistake. And sometimes you have to kind of get burned a little bit. You got to feel a little bit of the pain to realize, wait a minute, I have to have a different path, a different way of consuming information, a different way of getting, and a lot of that just comes with maturity with kids, right? Going from the difference between 16 and 23 years old nowadays is night and day, right? In terms of I think those skills in managing how that information is coming in and what to do with it, right? That's another thing. We're so reactionary in everything we do. Our society says, well, if you do A, I have to do B, or you go, it's an immediate if-then statement. It's not. It's okay to consume some information and do nothing, right? It is. It's okay to listen. Oh, I agree or don't agree, but I'm going to go back to making dinner. Right, you know what I mean? But we live in this society where we think we have to be immediately reactionary. It's like, we used to make the joke, the MTV generation, right? Everything was flash and in your face and all that. And now we this generation consumes information quickly, and there's an immediate snap call to action. You don't have to, just absorb it. Think about it a little bit. It's okay. Take a breath. And the sun's going to come up tomorrow.
Do you have, just speaking of social media, do you have a view on what role the federal government should play in regulating it?
Yeah, so, all right, so let's just, the TikTok is the big question, right? My concern is this. I totally understand why people want to ban TikTok. I get the concept why, because we don't want, especially in the live free or die state, taking our information and selling it to China and all that. But a couple things are going to happen. First, 300+ million people in America alone have TikTok, and you're just not going to make it disappear on their devices. But TikTok is not the problem. I mean, TikTok is part of the problem. But there's like 40 other apps out there right now that is consuming your information from foreign sources. And while it might not be directly owned by China, those foreign entities and private businesses in Spain could take your information and sell it to China tomorrow. Like, let's not be ignorant of that. Alibaba is owned by China. We're one of the biggest. I banned TikTok, not in the state, but I banned it on government devices, right? Because I didn't want them using TikTok as a way to pull information specifically off government devices. But when I did that executive order, I didn't just do TikTok. I have to go back and look. There's like 14 other apps that my team said, these are all doing the exact same thing. They don't have the flair of TikTok and maybe the downloads of TikTok, but these are all just as dangerous, by the way. And even if you banned all those, there's going to be another 14 after that and a 14 after that. So the problem is bigger than we appreciate. And it isn't just, okay, we can complain because China's directly taking our information, which I cannot stand, but just not be ignorant that a lot of people can create apps that take our information that get sold to third parties 4 or 5 different times and eventually end up on a Chinese server. That's unfortunately where we're going. I think there are some laws that we should put into place that talk about how the information is being processed, what information can be stored, and putting barriers around that, and what foreign entities can take it. But to say we're going to ban that app and that app, who's the app czar? I mean, when do we say, well, that one's in China, but these guys are in Russia, and this one of the owners lived in Iran, so should we worry about that? I mean, you're going to go down a rabbit hole of when does this stop? So I just get nervous about that, about thinking that if we just pass this law, we'll be good. I mean, that's exactly what China would love, a sense of comfort. We banned TikTok, we're good. No, guys, this is long-term problem.
But beyond the question of personal data, the idea of the power that domestic U.S. platforms have in elections to quickly spread stories, false stories. How do you have a view on regulating?
I'm getting more optimistic. I think Facebook, Twitter, they all got burned. I mean, really publicly burned for trying to manipulate. They thought they were doing the right thing, but they were doing the wrong thing. Not because they had the wrong view, but because they were really abusing, I think, the information coming out. And some of it was they were canceling real information and putting out their own misinformation unknowingly. So, and I'm going to take this a little bigger. It's not just social media, right? It's a lot of big business over the past few years. Anytime they get political, it never turns out well, right? Yep. Yeah. Target, Anheuser-Busch, Ford, Coca-Cola. We can keep going down the list. And conservative companies do it too. And one thing I've been trying to do in the past kind of 18 months, my free advice to a lot, it shocks me, I'm going to be a little rude, it shocks me how dumb some of these big companies are. And they're really so big, they're so disconnected from their customer. They listen to some consultants or PR people from New York or whatever it is. They just, they make it like it's no big deal. And next thing you know, they're getting their market share is getting crushed and they can't figure out what just happened, right? And that's when you talk to most of them, they're like, we had no idea. Here's an idea. Go sell a Coca-Cola. Focus on that. Go sell a Ford, right? Go sell a car. Go sell a widget. Focus on your business, ignore the politics. It has never turned out well when a company on the business side of things tries to get overly political. But they're getting wooed into it, and again, I think they're learning. Same with social media. Right. Manipulation of information, they kind of go, oh no, we have this opportunity. Nope, it didn't work out well, right? And I think a lot of those companies are backing off of that idea. And I think they are striving long-term to create better internal guidelines to say, let's just sell our product. Let's just be a social media platform and allow the information to go back and forth. And again, there's some really hateful, awful things on social media. Right. And you go back to free speech, of course. People have the right to free speech, but just because you don't agree with somebody or someone's a jerk doesn't mean you ban them on the platform or don't give them an audience. I do believe they have every right to speak out loud.
Just to come back a little bit, at the beginning we talked a little about the unique things that governors can do. And just in talking about our politics in general, there seems to be a contrast between Congress, where certain people on the fringes can build a brand and become well known by doing the outrageous and finding ways not to get things done, not to compromise, and get reelected. Governors are CEOs. Governors have to deliver. So how can governors play a bigger role in leading us out?
Yeah, again, lead by example. And I think, look, almost all the governors get along. I mean, in my 8 years, I can honestly tell you there's really only been two, maybe a third, but two real governors that really nobody liked. Nobody cared for at all. I don't mind.
Would you say who they are?
Do you really want me to? Yeah, Andrew Cuomo, complete jackass. No one liked him. And I gotta be honest. No one cares for Gavin. Gavin's just a prick. Excuse me. He just is. It's really disappointing. I got along with him. All of us got along for a while. But even the Democrats, they won't tell you out loud. But behind closed doors, you're like, oh God, look who's coming. You know, they all roll their eyes because. And look, governors are about. I'm sure that'll hit social media. Who cares? Governors all get along. I mean, some of the most liberal. Tina Kotek's a great example. Tina is the governor of Oregon. There is absolutely nothing Tina and I probably agree with politically, but she's a wonderful person. I think she's really great. I call her my favorite West Coast governor. You know, Phil Murphy in New Jersey, right? Phil Murphy and I get along great. We really do. He's got this amazing sense of humor. Again, I don't think he does a great job as governor. He probably might say the same as me. That's okay. But we have different approaches, but we get along really, really well. And overall, the governors really, really are a very good team because we're 24/7. There's no vacation, right? There's a shooting, there's a flood, there's a whatever. My phone's going to ring, and I'm the guy they call, and that's fine. That comes with the job. I don't really get vacation, and that's hard. And it's probably why after 4 terms I'd like vacation. I'd like to go on vacation, and I'd like to earn a real paycheck in the whole 9 yards. But that contrast has never been so clear between the nonsense in this city. And again, it's because as governors, we're in our states. We stay local. These guys here. These men and women almost have the excuse, but it really works against them to be here and not be with their constituents. Now, and let me back up what the job is so different, right? Congress has one job, 2 jobs. They approve or disapprove of a policy, and they approve or disapprove of funding. Right. And that's it. They don't design the mental health system. They don't design a system for better homeless services or integration of education or what. They don't design anything, right? I think CEOs, I think all governors should be engineers. I think all politicians should be engineers, by the way, because it's about, okay, are we going to design flexibility in the system? We have a policy, we have some funding, okay, fine, but now we have to figure out how do we get from A to B to C, and actually, are we going to get a return on that investment? And if not, are we going to be able to pivot, or are we just going to be stalled? Are we going to do things the old-fashioned way? You bring in stakeholders, you bring in, doesn't matter the political party, you just design and get stuff done. They don't have to do any of that. And to your point, most importantly, they can raise a lot. I think campaign finance reform is drastically needed in this country, and anyone who's not talking about that is missing the boat. To your point, they are extreme, they do nothing, and they raise a ton of money off it. Right. Not just to get themselves reelected, but for the showmanship of that extremism. But they're fools. I mean, how's the Marjorie Taylor Greene bill doing? Is there any bill that she's ever even... I don't even know what she does. Or Matt Gaetz. I mean, but they're known for their extremism, but they actually don't functionally do anything, you know, for the betterment of good governance and civics. So that's really frustrating. Now, I think ultimately, if you want to know where I'm a little pessimistic and where this country is going to be in trouble, it's about 8 years from now. In about 8 years, I'm a fiscal hawk. I really am. I work really hard to balance budgets. It's not easy. I have a surplus every single year, and I always cut taxes. And it's not easy. It's really, really hard. These guys get away with not even doing it. Even the Republicans will tell you it's not that important, which blows my mind, and that's a real frustration. Probably the number one reason why I didn't run for the Senate was I had Republican senators saying, well, no one really cares about balanced budgets and fiscal discipline. And I said, screw you, I don't want to be part of this at all. But what's going to happen in 8 years? Social Security is going bankrupt. That is a fact. And there is already a law in place that the Social Security benefits that some folks in this room might be waiting for are going to get cut. I think it's 23%. Like, that's in law. That's happening. Your benefits are being cut. Someone has to fix that, has to stop that. And it isn't borrowing more money, right? Then, immediately after that, Medicare will go bankrupt. That is a mathematical fact. It is coming. And it's coming much faster than anyone wants to acknowledge. The problem is Congress waits for the crisis before they react. And as anybody knows, if you're solving a problem in the middle of a crisis, you're not putting forth really the best solution. You're just plugging the gap and hoping for the best. So that's the frustration that this town gets away with, and we allow them as citizens to get away with, only reacting and forcing them to do something when the crisis really, really hits. I say fire. I mean, I mean it sincerely. I'm not making a joke. I honestly believe just fire them all, right? Fire take the U.S. Senate, and I have great friends on the U.S. Senate. I was with Senator Ricketts, former Governor Ricketts, but Senator Ricketts last night for dinner. Great guy. But you can't tell me if we fired all 100 U.S. senators and replaced them with 100 randomly chosen working adults in America, you can't tell me they're going to get less done, right? I mean, think about how low the bar has been set. Think about it for a second. You can't tell me we're going to get a worse result, right? So they've really set this bar so low. They pass one bill, pat themselves on the back, and want accolades for it. So it's very disappointing. It really is. And so I think just on a different level, because governors have to be there 24/7 and always accountable, we have a different standard that we have, and that you all, the citizens, force us to live by, which is great. And in New Hampshire, I got to get elected. I'm the only governor, me and Phil Scott, governor of Vermont. We're the only two governors in the country that have to get elected every 2 years. And people say, isn't that terrible? And I'm like, well, for me it is. Yeah, it sucks. But for the citizens, it's awesome. If I'm doing my job and I think I've earned it, you can rehire me. And if not, you can fire me. And you should if I'm not doing my job and I'm not living to certain standards. And I love that feedback response system. I love that accountability. It's really hard as a governor to raise money and run every 2 years, and it drains on the family and all that sort of thing. But it is the way the system, I think the system should work to get the best results.
We got a text that your father stopped watching for a few minutes, but I think he's back on C-SPAN. So maybe I got
He's over at Dunkin' Donuts.
The 1 minute. No, we have 1 minute left. But I know one thing that you should be very proud of is the Education Freedom Act, and maybe with your dad watching, you could tell us a little bit.
Look, it's school choice, right? For 30 years, we fought hard for school choice. We actually finally got it done, and we did it. I don't know if we talked about this yesterday, but we did it. I said. They kept trying to do school choice for everyone, and we couldn't get it passed. Even some of our kind of free stater, libertarian-minded Republicans didn't want it because they didn't want public money going to private schools or Catholic schools because they thought there was a real boundary there. So I got it passed because I said, okay, we're going to focus on up to 300% of the federal poverty level and below. So it's school choice where you can, as a parent, you can decide how the state money to education for your kid, you can decide however you want to spend it. Right? Homeschool, private school, charter, whatever it is. But we did it for the lowest income families. The ones, I mean, it's a rough way of saying it, but why should private school only be for the rich kids, right? Let's start with those that have no choice or limited choices because they are one parent working family or whatever it is. And so it was amazing. We didn't do it for political reasons, but you had folks coming up saying, no one has ever asked me what I thought of my kids' education. And they felt empowered. They felt thrilled. And you had a lot of low-income families, a lot of inner-city families for various reasons, rural families that just didn't have economic opportunities as everybody else. All of a sudden we're saying, here, there's $10,000. What do you want to do with it? Where do you want it to go? What school do you want? And most of them just stuck with their public schools. It's fine. But for those, because our public schools are really great. We have amazing teachers and amazing public schools. You don't do school choice because your schools are failing. Our schools are phenomenal. You do school choice because, out of 100 kids, there's 1 or 2 where the 4 traditional walls of the classroom just aren't working. That's just not. So maybe a little extra, help on the side, maybe go into a completely different environment, maybe it's a bullying issue, whatever. Who am I to say why you should be taking that path? The government's job is not to solve your problems. It's not. My job is not to come up with a solution for you. My job is to come up with as many doors of opportunity for you, your business, your kids, your family, whatever. And then live free or die. You do you, man. You pick the door that is best for you, right? And that's what school choice is. I'm not telling you have to fit in this box or that box or that box. It's you know your kids, you know your business, you know your needs, you know your story. And so while from an empathetic standpoint, I can't listen to everybody's story, I appreciate everyone has an important story, an important path, an important viewpoint. And at a local level, what's more local than you and your family, you should be able to make that choice. And if it doesn't work for you, you can pivot. You can try something else. You're not stuck in that box. And so that's really what it's all about. It's not about politics. It's not because the system doesn't work or anything like that. Like I said, our education system is phenomenal in New Hampshire. It's because I don't know what your story is, and you have every right to find your path for your kids. And if you're doing that, that's how you create efficiency. That's how you get rid of bureaucracy that gets in your way. You create efficiency in the system, and you allow people to stay empowered, both in civics, in education. And it's just a different way. Look, New Hampshire, we're a little bit different, in case you can't tell. I would say we're a little different, but we're a hell of a lot better.
Governor, thank you. Thank you for
bet,
joining us
really
today.
Great
Great conversation.